Monday, July 7th, the Bowdoin International Music Festival kicks off this week's live streams with the Jasper String Quartet playing youthful chamber music by Britten, music by Dvorak, capitalizing on prior success, and Gabriela Lena Frank's piece inspired by Peruvian folk music and instruments. Wow, what a great concert this is going to be. That will be at 7:30 in the evening. That's the usual time for all of the Bowdoin Festival live streams. 7:30 in the evening today, July 7th, 4:30 in the afternoon on the West Coast, 1:30 at night in Europe, and 9:30 Tuesday morning down under in Australia. Lovely way to start your day. And it's free of charge. Anyway, the Jasper String Quartet is Jay Freivogel and Karen Kim on the violin, Andrew Gonzalez on the viola, and Rachel Henderson Freivogel on the cello. They were formed about 20 years ago at Oberlin Conservatory when they were all students. They went through a series of graduate and residence programs, Rice University, Yale University, and it's been onward and upward since then. They are currently directors of their own Jasper Chamber Concert Series in Philadelphia, and they have an extensive discography with all of their recordings being highly critically acclaimed. So let me tell you a little bit about what they're going to be playing, with special emphasis on the Gabriela Lena Frank, because what they seem to be doing at the Bowdoin Music Festival is sandwiching a contemporary composer in between two more classic composers. So this concert starts out with they're playing Benjamin Britten's Three Divertimenti, which started out as a schoolboy piece, which Britten wrote while he was, at the Royal College of Music, young man. Three pieces called March, Waltz, and Burlesque, and he called them all together at the time, Go Play Boy, Play. And then, and played them, did a recital at the RCOM, playing them just before he graduated. But a few years later, in 1936, when he was starting to become grown up, he played them again in a recital at Wigmore Hall and renamed them Three Divertimenti. They will then finish up the concert with Dvorak's String Quartet number 10 in E-flat major, opus 51, the Slavonic Quartet, dedicated to Jean Becker. Well, now why is it dedicated to Jean Becker? Well, Jean Becker was an Italian violinist, and he had put together a string quartet called the Quartetto Fiorentino, which was a very modest thing to do rather than naming it after himself at the time. This is late 1800s. And anyway, Dvorak came out with his Slavonic dances in 1878, and they were a huge hit. I mean, it's amazing how pieces of classical music like Mascagni's Cavalleria Rusticana would just rocket to fame almost overnight. Not unlike he did on these, musical competitions that we have in our time. But they didn't have the television and the radio and all that to do it. Anyway, Becker saw how successful the Slavonic dancers were, and he said, well, he would love to have that kind of music to play with the string quartet. If it were Dvorak and it was called Slavonic, well, everybody would pay to buy tickets to go see it. So he asked Dvorak to compose it, and Dvorak did so. And it was done by 1879, and then Becker took it around Europe, made a lot of money, capitalizing on the success of these Slavonic dances. So even then, music was not uncorrupted by commercial motives. Let me tell you a little bit. Let me tell you now about the composer Gabriela Lena Frank, whose contemporary piece highlights this particular concert. Gabriela Frank, born in 1972, which I think makes her about 50-something now, in Berkeley. Her father and mother met in Peru. Her father was of Lithuanian Jewish heritage, but he joined the Peace Corps and went down to Peru and met her mother, who was of Chinese heritage. And so she's sort of Lithuanian Jewish, Peruvian, Chinese American. I mean, a real global person. And she went to Rice and for her bachelor's and master's, and then she got a doctorate in composition at the University of Michigan, one of my alma maters. And she has composed for, well, here, I'll give you a partial list: the Kronos Quartet, San Francisco Symphony, the Houston Symphony, the Chiara String Quartet, the Brentano Quartet, Yo-Yo Ma and that Silk Road Project, and the Philadelphia Orchestra when they wanted to celebrate the appointment of Yannick Nézet-Séguin as their new conductor. They had her compose a piece, and she's been a composer in residence all over the place. So the piece, though, doing by her is called Leyendas, an Andean Walkabout. And it's not brand new. It's 2001, so it's been around. It's had time to rode, as the French would say, get worked in. And it's based on, well, let me tell you how she puts it herself, because she provided a note about it to the festival, as many of the composers have done. You'll see when we get to other concerts. Quote, Leyendas, an Andean walkabout, mixes elements from the Western classical and Andean folk music traditions with the idea that cultures can coexist without the subjugation of one by the other. She was, unquote, she had been doing some reading along the lines of that, and philosophically and socially. And so she composed this piece, which is for string quartet, but it's based on specific folk instruments which were used in the Andean folk tradition or other forms of music. So one of them is the toyos, or the panpipe, but they have a very large panpipe that is played in parallel fourths. Then another is the tarkeada section. Now, tarkeada is the section, or tarkeada is the section of this piece, and it's related to a flute, which is described as a heavy wooden duct flute called the tarka. And it is typically played in fourths, fifths, and octaves. Then there's a section called the Himno de Zampoñas. That sounds like the hymn of Zampona, which is based on a panpipe ensemble dividing up the melody through a technique known as octane. Then there's a section called Chasqui, which is about this legendary runner that they had in Andean times, who would run through the mountains as a messenger, very reminiscent of where we get our marathon from. You know, the modern day marathon comes from a Greek runner who had to run the 43 kilometers from Marathon back to Athens to report news of what was going on in that battle, which threatens the survival of Athens. Of course, you know, among the Greeks, I don't think anybody except someone who was fighting for the survival of Athens would have been crazy enough to run 43 kilometers. But whatever. Anyway, so there are some other sections involved, one of which is based on the Lorona, who were professional crying women who sang at funeral rituals. And another one is coqueteos, which is that sounds like the French coquette, which means a flirt, and it's a flirtatious love song that men would sing in a group. But all of this has been transposed into the format of a string quartet. So highly interesting in terms of the musical challenge doing it. And that woman laughing there in front of the piano was the one who pulled it off.